Welcome back to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. We are in the first part of the book, the very first chapter, the 4 aids, and we have already covered the first aid, which is Shastra, second aid, which is the Abhyasa, the effort that is required, and currently we are going through the third aid, which is Guru, the teacher. Even though the Guru of integral yoga, the supreme teacher, is within and who is also everywhere and everyone, the inner guide is the supreme teacher. It's very difficult for the human mind to conceive that and establish a relationship. Therefore, some names, some forms are required. Besides, conceiving that which is all and transcends all is difficult for the human mind. Therefore, some intermediary, an incarnation, a world teacher, a guru is required. For most people, it is exceptionally rare individuals who can leverage the past incarnations, past teachers, and make their presence a living force of transformation. Vast majority would require some living close influence of a human intermediary who has realized in themselves this relationship, this inner union with the divine. Now, today we are into the 40th episode, paragraph number 30. And in the description, there is a link to this chapter. Those who are new, please look at that link and come to the 30th paragraph of the chapter. The teacher of the integral yoga will follow as far as he may the method of the teacher within us. So integral yoga too needs its teachers, human intermediaries who can help the seekers to come in touch with their own inner guide. And such a teacher, when you are facilitating that to someone, they too follow the methods of the inner guide. So the teacher of the integral yoga will follow as far as he may the method of the teacher within us. He will lead the disciple through the nature of the disciple. Now this is very crucial. Each individual has a unique nature, certain swabhava, certain swadharma, and certain evolutionary stage and certain cultural context in which the person has been formed. So all that needs to be taken into consideration when guiding and leading someone. So he will lead the disciple through the nature of the disciple. To know the nature of the learner, the seeker, therefore, is very, very crucial. Teaching, example, influence. These are the 3 instruments of the Guru. Here we have the framework, a certain hierarchic framework of 3 instruments the Guru can use in order to invoke that inner guide and help someone to come in touch with their own divinity. These 3 are teaching, example, and influence. Let's go through these one by one. Teaching, example, and influence. These are the 3 instruments of the Guru. But the wise teacher will not seek to impose himself on his opinion. But the wise teacher will not seek to impose himself or his opinions on the passive acceptance of the receptive mind. So on one hand, you need the seeker to have a receptive mind. On the other hand, it is extremely important for the teacher of integral yoga to ensure that you are not imposing your views on the receptive state of the seeker. So what you are supposed to do? So the wise teacher will not seek to impose himself or his opinions on the passive acceptance of the receptive mind. He will throw in only what is productive and sure as a seed, a suggestion, a hint. So he will throw in only what is productive and sure. Imagine the receptive mind of the seeker is like a soil. You're just preparing the soil and just throwing the seeds that you're sure is the right one for this particular learner. So he will throw only in what is productive and sure as a seed, which will grow under the divine fostering within. Because the teacher is only throwing the right seeds, and there is a divine fostering from within. The seeker has the divine presence within. And that's what the teacher of integral yoga need to see through. Behind the veil of the frontal appearances of the seeker, who may appear to be lost and confused and stumbling their way through, but you need to look at the deeper inner divine fostering. It is into that presence and into invoke that presence only the useful, productive suggestions, seed ideas are planted into the seeker's receptive mind. The wise teacher will not seek to impose himself or his opinions on the passive acceptance of the receptive mind. He will throw in only what is productive and sure as a seed, which will grow under the divine fostering within. The divine fostering within. He will seek to awaken much more than to instruct. Instruction is one thing. Awakening the potential within is something else. What an integral yoga teacher needs to do is to awaken, not so much to instruct. So he will seek to awaken much more than to instruct. He will aim at the growth of the faculties and the experiences by a natural process and free expression. Growth of the faculties. The entire instrumental layers are to develop. There is a faculty of mind having its intelligence, having its will. There is the vital instrumentation with its vitality, the energy, the senses, all that. And the heart and its emotions are to be refined and developed. So preparing the instrumentation all the way to the body, preparing the body to be pure, receptive, the vital to be calm and receptive, the mind to be supple, wide, open, and receptive, so that these faculties themselves develop under the divine fostering from within. So it's not so much of instructing, it is awakening the possibilities that are already lying dormant within the seeker. So he will seek to awaken much more than to instruct. He will aim at the growth of the faculties and the experiences. One is to bring the growth of the faculties. One is existing faculties, the other is faculties that are yet to be developed, fostering their growth. For example, coming in touch with the intuition and the intuitive guidance coming from the inmost guide, helping the seeker to come in touch with that, learning to discern that, so that that will grow. And through that, And that will happen only when there are experiences, direct experiences, helping the seeker to arrive at an experiential understanding of these subtler inner movements, directions, discernment, signals, all that. And by a natural process and free expansion, each individual has certain organic way of growing. A cookie cutter solution that works for all will not work in the case of integral yoga. It has to be customized for the individuals, even when there is a universal generic principles that needs to be followed. But each individual has their specific nature and a certain organic way of growing and expanding, and that has to be respected and honored. He will give a method as an aid, as a utilizable device, not as an imperative formula or a fixed routine. So it is perfectly all right to give a method. And integral yoga is not a collection of methods. This is very important to understand. It's not a particular breathing technique. It's not a particular set of asanas. It's not a particular set of kriyas. It's not a particular form of meditation. These are all aids, the methods that can be developed in endless variety of forms. And these are, we must know, only methods. One can give a method, but must know that it is not the method that is the key thing, and should know that it is only a utilizable device and not an imperative formula or a fixed routine. An imperative formula, a fixed formula that everyone must follow, a cookie cutter template into which you try to fit in everybody, it doesn't work. And a fixed routine. Each individual will have their own pace and rhythm of inner development. So customization will be required. So while generic tools, methods can be given, one need to constantly watch over to see what is working for whom and customize it, modify it, refine it as you progress, as individuals progress, and adapt. And there is no fixed routine, an imperative formula that is applicable to everyone. So he will give a method as an aid, as a utilizable device, not as an imperative formula or a fixed routine. And he will be on his guard against any turning of the means to a limitation, against the mechanizing of process. There is a tendency in human nature to routinize and mechanize. We are practically in the habit of automating everything. If we look at our daily routine, these are made of habits that are practically automations. We run our life on autopilot. So even when you give a method to somebody, or you yourself take up a method for yourself to progress, when you repeat it few times, that begin to form into a habit. And once the automation forms, your conscious attention and awareness is not required. It becomes a habitual automation. And everyone tend to convert everything into an automation. So one has to be guarding against this automation, because yoga can be made really alive and progressive only when your consciousness is present. You're fully present in the act. Often when you do the regular lighting of a diya, a lamp, or lighting of incense, or doing pranams in front of a photograph, whatsoever be the methods that you have developed for yourself, there is a tendency to automate it. And the moment things become automation, it becomes unconscious, habitual, and not effective. End of the day, it is a consciousness that we put into a gesture, a form of practice that makes the difference, a conscious intention. So he will be on his guard against any turning of the means into a limitation. Once you give a method and the method fossilizes and become a frozen framework, that become a limitation. So against the mechanizing of the process. So we have to be very, very vigilant about the tendency to mechanize and make the method into a limitation. His whole business is to awaken the divine light and set working the divine force, of which he himself is only a means and an aid, a body or a channel. So this is the true work of a teacher of integral yoga. To awaken the divine light. The divine light is already there in the seeker. And your role is to awaken it. And how can you awaken something which you cannot see? And you can see only to the extent you are awake to the light that is within you. To the degree you are in touch with that light. Only in the light of that light you will be able to see the light of the seeker and help the seeker to see their own inner light, so that that light awakens and come to the conscious awareness of the seeker. So to awaken the divine light and set working the divine force, light and force, because without the force, the shift in consciousness cannot take place. You may develop in awareness, you may develop in knowledge, but without force, actual change in life cannot take place. So on one hand, you need to awaken the light. You need to also awaken the force that propels the individual on the path. Awakening that flame of aspiration, its intensity, and opening to the grace and the workings of the divine Shakti in the individual, so that that power actually moves, and helping the seeker to recognize these movements and learn to discern and surrender to the happy impulsions of the divine force, of which he himself is only a means and an aid, a body or a channel. So you are, as a teacher, only an instrument, a channel through which that greater force is acting. So for the facilitator or a teacher of integral yoga, without this foundation of being open to that divine force and light and being an instrument, without which there is no way you can be a means for someone else's awakening. His whole business is to awaken the divine light and set working the divine force, of which he himself is only a means and an aid, a body or a channel. The example is more powerful than the instruction. So one thing is to instruct the seeker, helping the person to understand the complexities of navigating the path. So helping through instruction, your verbal instruction, guidance, teaching. But more important than instruction is the example. Example is more powerful than instruction. Often what you instruct someone else to do, you yourself have not embodied. There is a gap. Because you may know things in the mind, and from there one can still instruct. But only when you have fully embodied it, then your word will have power. And once you have embodied something, when you're really living the truth of light and force within, then you don't really have to do that instruction. You become a living, embodied example. So the example is more powerful than the instruction, but it is not the example of the outward acts nor that of the personal character which is of most importance. Here again, it's not the example of the outward acts. One can still do the outward acts, but more important than the outward act is something else. Nor the personal character which is of most importance. So it's not the personal character, it is not the most outward act that is of importance. So what is important for a teacher of integral yoga? These have their place and utility. So external act has its place and character has its place and utility. But what will most stimulate aspiration in others? Stimulate aspiration in others is the central fact of the divine realization within him, governing his whole life and inner state and all his activities. So here is the crucial factor. This is the divine realization within him. So to what degree you have realized and corresponding state of being developed and formed within you, that is the measure of your ability to radiate that light and force. And this is what can kindle, this is what can stimulate the flame of aspiration in others. It is quite easy to be a scholar. You can study the scriptures, study all the wonderful books, and you have all the knowledge. But word born out of pure knowledge that is theoretically learned is practically shallow. It cannot really kindle the fire. Only to the extent you yourself has awakened the divine light and force, and you yourself are living an inspired life born out of that divine breath of inspiration. When it is flowing through your thought, your speech, your action, your manasa, vacha, karmana, and the more you are embodying it, you become the radiant source, which can kindle the aspiration, which can stimulate others. And only when that is inwardly active and operational, your presence and your word, your outward acts can be of effective impact. Otherwise, it's not your outer form of action, activity, or specific character that you have that actually makes the difference. It is the inner content from where these things are radiating. So, these have their place and utility. He is referring to the outward acts and the personal character. These have their place and utility. But what will most stimulate aspiration in others is the central fact of the divine realization within him, governing his whole life and inner state and all his activities. So everything that you do need to be governed by your inner realization and corresponding inner state of being. So whole life and inner state and all his activities. This is the universal and essential element. And this is a universal and essential element. It is not specific to a cultural context. It is universal and essential. No matter where you are, whatever be the culture in which you are teaching, this must be the essential foundation from which the teaching can truly happen. The rest belongs to individual person and circumstance. It is this dynamic realization that the sadhaka must feel and reproduce in himself according to his own nature. Each sadhak has his own nature, his own swabhava and swadharma. Accordingly, you are invoking and forming, reproducing that divine light and force within you. As it forms and grows within you according to your nature, it will take on its own unique trail of action. So it is this dynamic realization that the sadhaka must feel and reproducing himself according to his own nature. He need not strive after an imitation from outside. So there is a tendency in us to seek to imitate others who are successful in these ventures, whatever be you are attempting to do. It's good to take inspiration, but essentially, what is your own swadharma, your own swabhava, what is your own inner realization? Out of that would emerge your own unique way of conveying your inner realizations. He need not strive after an imitation from outside, which may well be sterilizing rather than productive of right and natural fruits. So trying to imitate can be sterilizing rather than productive of right and natural fruits. So avoid the imitations. There is something that divine has given you, and there is certain unique flowering that is happening through you. And your business is to directly relate to the divine within you and let that presence grow and form, and from there radiate, bringing out your true essential character, which is of that natural inborn perfection, finding its unique expression, just like you have a unique fingerprint. So the way you will be guiding, teaching too will have its uniqueness that is specific to you, because divine never mass produce. There is always an absolutely unique flavor to each individual. When you truly individualize, then that divine expression in you will find its unique expression, unique trail, unique form. So therefore, avoid imitation from outside, which may well be sterilizing rather than productive of right and natural fruits. Influence is more important than example. Remember, Sri Aurobindo gave 3 levels of instruments the teacher of integral yoga can utilize. One is instruction, second is example, third is influence. Influence is more important than example. We saw that example was more powerful than instruction. Now, the third one, influence, is even more powerful than example. Influence is not the outward authority of the teacher over his disciple, but the power of his contact, of his presence, of the nearness of his soul to the soul of another, infusing into it, even though in silence, that which he himself is and possesses. This is the greatest secret, where here is the transmission. It is the power of his contact, his presence, of the nearness of his soul to the soul of another. So there is a transfusion that happens between the seeker and the guru, the teacher and the learner. And it is in that contact, soul to soul, there is a natural transfusion. There is a natural transmission. And that transmission happens when you have yourself within established that presence, that contact, that inner growth of the divine light and force. It is that which gets transmitted. And that transmission happens when there is this inner contact. And this can happen in silence, because the presence is growing within you, and it will grow like a field of enlarging, expanding, wideness. When someone come in touch with your field, when someone come in contact with your inner being, that's where the soul-to-soul contact becomes so important. There is a natural kindling of the fire that takes place. So influence is not the outward authority of the teacher over his disciple, but the power of his contact, of his presence, of the nearness of his soul to the soul of another, infusing into it, even though in silence, that which he himself is and possesses. So what you possess within you, what you are within you, the degree to which you have embodied the divine light and force, that will find its expression even in your deep silence. Because you're not limited to this body. You are a wide presence. And the divine presence grows and expands and widens and infuses into everything that is surrounding. And it's not even limited to physical distance. It can transmit across distance when there is an inner contact of soul with soul, because then you are entering into the domain that is beyond time, beyond space. There is a moment of eternity where the contact happens and there is a transmission that happens beyond the distance, beyond the physical distance, and even distance in time. That's how even the past masters become living presence and great force in someone's life when you have that inner contact. They are all there, ready to guide and pour in their light. And we can see in the Vedas, the rishis referring to the forefathers still helping their new generation of seekers. It is all available to us. And the teacher of integral yoga, whose main, most powerful method is of that inner realization, which can make the transmission even in silence. So no instruction is required, no example is required. It is that growing inner presence, inner realization, that embodied light and force has its impact. This is the greatest contribution one can make. This is the supreme sign of the master. A true master is that influence, who is this living field which attracts seekers, like seekers would come like bees attracted to the honey, coming from all over. And it is happening because the master holds the field. Master is blooming from within, radiating from within. The light and force is radiating from within. And into that, take a dip into that field, into that presence, the seekers come. That's where we can see in Indian tradition this whole ritual of darshan, coming in touch with the master, just being in the presence of the master. That very presence infuses their light and force into you. When you're receptive and when you're open. So the influence is more important than example. Influence is not outward authority of the teacher over his disciple, but the power of his contact, of his presence, of the nearness of his soul to the soul of another, infusing into it, even though in silence, that which he himself is and possesses. This is the supreme sign of the master. For the greatest master is much less a teacher than a presence. Presence with capital P. It is the divine presence. The greatest master is much less a teacher than a presence, pouring the divine consciousness and its constituting light and power and purity and bliss into all who are receptive around him. See the sequence of those 4 words. Constituting light and power and purity and bliss. Light and power and purity and bliss. All the aspects of Satchidananda. And that pouring happens to whoever is around, whoever is receptive. Receptivity is more important than physical nearness. You can be near a great master who is radiant and pouring the inner light and force and bliss all around. But if you're not receptive, no matter how physically close you are, there is hardly any reception. So, unless the learner, the seeker has developed enough and be supple, open, receptive, the master's influence cannot be received. On the other hand, the master, growing in that inner stature of the divine light and force, become increasingly growingly powerful field of light and force, purity and bliss, which is constantly radiating. And whoever is in touch with him, no matter where they are on the planet, receives that light and influence, regardless of the physical distance. So it is not limited by physical distance. It is an inner contact. He is much less a teacher than a presence pouring the divine consciousness and its constituting light and power and purity and bliss into all who are receptive around him. And it shall also be a sign of the teacher of the integral yoga that he does not arrogate to himself guruhood in a humanly vain and self-exalting spirit. This is an error and a serious difficulty and mistake that can happen on the way as you grow in your light and force, in your increasing inner realization. Even others may begin to recognize you and call you as a guru, mentor, teacher, and all that. That's the time to be very, very vigilant, not to get into this exalted ego that sees himself to be a guru who is helping, saving the world and helping thousands and thousands of people. And you can get completely lost into that drama of guruhood and lose your path. Lose your humility, lose your inner contact with the divine. Ego takes over. So we have to be very, very vigilant about this. So it shall also be the sign, be a sign of the teacher of integral yoga that he does not arrogate to himself guruhood, arrogating to himself, claiming to be a guru, arrogating to himself as a humanly vain, in a humanly vain and self-exalting spirit that will make your fall from grace. So his work, if he has one, is a trust from above. The divine master, the divine directly entrusted you with certain tasks that you, as an instrument, as a channel on earth, as a well-prepared center of action for the divine will to act. So his work is, if he has one, is the trust from above. He himself a channel, a vessel, or a representative. So it could be a channel, a vessel, a representative. Here, we have to be very careful again. These days, we will find across the world people claiming to be channels. I am channeling this master, I am channeling this entity, that entity. There are all kinds of channeling that is happening. Here, discernment is required. Otherwise, one can get easily lost in the intermediate zone. Because when we break out of the individual ego mold and open to increasingly the larger being, which increasingly become universal, we must remember that human mind itself has its universal mind. Human vital has its universal vital. Human physicality has its universal physical. So something that is transpersonal does not mean it is the divine. Divine consciousness begins when you are in touch with the psychic being within. That is the spark that is growing into the personality of the divine within. And only when you transcend the normal human mind into the higher planes of existence, then only the spiritualization begins. Only when you ascend to those higher levels, the transmission, then you become a true channel of that which is truly beyond the human range. Otherwise, what happens is many people do open to the larger forces of nature. Whether it is in the vital plane, the mental plane, there are beings that are of universal nature, but still in the vital domain, mental domain, or even the physical domain. And they are tremendously powerful beings who can take possession of you as an instrument, and you become a channel, a channeling agency, channeling some or other entity. And here is a fundamental error that can happen on the path. So be vigilant about what type of an instrument are you becoming, what are you transmitting, what are you opening yourself to. And it is in this condition that establishing of inner stillness, calmness, silence, peace, that profound sweetness that comes with the union, with the inner contact, with the divine, all that become very, very crucial. And it is when the contact with the psychic being emerges, that's when that profound sense of gratitude and recognition of the divine master in the universe and surrendering to that with a profound, deep joy and gratitude and knowing yourself to be a willing servitor, all that happens. Otherwise, powers can enter you. Entities of knowledge can pour down their streaming of knowledge, powers. Even siddhis can come your way and can get easily carried away in this glimmer of delusions. So be aware of such dangers on the path. His work, if he has one, is a trust from above. He himself a channel, a vessel or a representative. That's all what he is. He is a man helping his brothers, a child leading children, a light kindling other lights, an awakened soul awakening souls. At highest, a power or presence of the divine, calling to him other powers of the divine. The Supreme Divine has infinite possibilities. Your journey as a seeker, and as you grow in increasing contact, and when that light and force is growing within you, and as you embody more and more of that light and force within you, that's when others get inspired by you and gather around you, come to you for guidance. And that's where many people would recognize you as their mentor. And you might as well provide the support, but always remembering that there is this trust given from above. And even when you have realized some aspect of the divine, you're constantly opening to the divine and receiving into you more and more of the rich variety of the facets and dimensions of the divine into you and growing in richness, inner richness. And that's the safest poise to take. The more you grow in the inner contact with your soul within, you would feel yourself more and more to be like a child of the Divine Mother, being guided, protected, nourished, supported by the divine love, divine wisdom, divine power, and you would feel increasing purity and joy of being that child of the divine who is leading other children, and you have your playmates, or a man helping his brothers, a child leading children, a light kindling other lights. Only when you are well lit, you can light up others. An awakened soul, awakening souls. At the highest, a power or presence of the divine. This is the highest possibility, a power or presence of the divine, calling to him other powers of the divine. So you may have realized one aspect, one has one power of the divine, but you need to constantly open to the infinite variety and possibilities of the divine, ready to pour down and settle and form within you and transform and divinize you beyond your recognition. So always know that there is no end to the sadhana. There are many traditions where we see people claiming that on such and such date, he or she got enlightened. Now you are done with everything, you have become a teacher. There is no such thing in integral yoga. You would remain a sadhak. You remain a child. In fact, you would grow more and more like a child who is living in the light and delight of the divine, growing within you, all around you, and increasingly greater and greater, deeper and deeper realizations will dawn upon you, dawn after dawn. And there's no end to that transformation. Because our yoga is not yoga of liberation. It is of transformation. That means the divine pours into a receptacle, into the instrument, according to the capacity of the instrument and the specific work to be done in the world through that particular instrument. So always be ready and open, and never assume that you have arrived, you have completed your sadhana. There is nothing like that in integral yoga. We are just beginning on the path. We are sadhaks. We are just beginning the journey. And whatsoever be the realization that you have, it is just a small step. There is an infinite variety of possibilities of the divine, unimaginable, that are ready to pour in and transform you and the world. So, see yourself as a child leading other children, man helping his brothers, light kindling other lights, awakened soul awakening souls. At highest, a power or presence of the divine, calling to him other powers of the divine. Isn't it beautiful to be on such a path where there is an inexhaustible realization, one after other, and whole new world is birthing. Whole earth is undergoing a transformation, and you can be a willing servitor of that transformation. So with that, let's close this episode. Thank you for being with me. Please do share your insights. See you next week.